We've seen that big events like Sharpsville and more recently the murder of George Floyd have played a pivotal role, a catalytic role in kind of mobilizing a lot of action against racism. Now, why does it take atrocities like these to occur before such movements really gain momentum? Is there a way of maintaining that momentum afterward, much far beyond that, or do you feel that it's always inevitable that they will dwindle and then something serious then has to happen again? Patricia, what do you think?
Well, I think the first thing is, I think we all hoped that this wouldn't happen again. One of the tragedies of the George Floyd incident, why it was so painful, that murder, is those of my generation thought those days were over, where people could kill someone else on the basis of their color openly and without fear of retribution. Now, there was retribution. But I think the thing that we are doing right now is to make this systemic racism respond to it in a systemic way, and to understand that this isn't something that's going to go away unless we all commit to making it going away. It's not an add-on. It has to, the things we have to do to stop racism have to become an integral part of everything we do. And if it's not mainstreamed, it won't get better. And I think the big lesson was you cannot take your foot off that pedal. And if you do, it's going to come back. But I think the thing that we need to be proud of is in the 1960s and 70s, you had to fight for an understanding of what racism was. You had to fight to get people to understand that it was pernicious and wicked and absolutely disgusting. What happened with George Floyd is immediately, all around the world, people said, not in my name. And they were across the globe protesting and making sure that this wasn't something that was just going to happen in America and everybody was going to close their eyes. The whole world woke up and said no. So I think if we're looking at where we were and where we are, I'm always someone who wants to look at the silver lining. So what's good about this? What's good about it was the protest was immediate and that we have had to wake up. Now, we don't want to wake up again. So I think the lesson we have to learn now is it's not done. And it's going to take all of us to make sure that we continue highlighting it, that we build it into our everyday programs, we make the regulations right, we make the statutory provisions right, but then we implement, because there has to come a time, there has to become a day when race is no longer something that divides and destroys us, but it's something that we celebrate and enjoy and know that no one will be treated unfairly and disproportionately unfairly because of the race or the color of their skin or the faith that they have or the size that they come to or their gender. These things have to be our past, not our future.
Jaha, what do you think about keeping the momentum and keeping activists, young activists especially, inspired towards the aim of combating racism?
I mean, I think we all have a moral obligation to combat racism, regardless of what our race is, regardless of where we come from. And I think young people should remember that slavery, there was a time when Black people were sold as slaves. And now the fact that we have a hashtag that Black Lives Matter, personally, I don't even think, we should be having hashtags like that, because humanity is humanity. And whenever we see injustice, whenever we hear injustice, we should know that whatever directly impacts another human being could potentially impact us indirectly. And which is why it's important that we use our voice and we use our resources and our connections to ensure that the world is more just and more free. And with the case of George Floyd, for instance, with what happened, I personally couldn't watch the videos because I think that was the most horrific thing to do to a human being, especially someone that's already on the ground. And We continue to hear cases of it. We continue to see it. And this is a systematic problem. This is not um, just something that we have some few bad cops. It's a culture, it's a history. And and until we are willing to unlearn the things that we've learned that got us here in the first place, we will never bring justice, and we would never be able to end racism. So, yeah.
Thank you. Well, this George Floyd incident obviously happened in the United States, and it's specifically spotlighted the issue of prejudice against black people in America and then beyond. But I wonder, in the context of the Commonwealth, Patricia, how that incident, from your observations, how that incident had inspired activists from around the world to combat other forms of racism in different countries.
I think it was a big wake-up call. And so if you look at what we did in the Commonwealth, there was an immediate response, because the Commonwealth had been instrumental back in the 60s in ending apartheid in South Africa. But it's very important to remember when the Commonwealth was actually created, what the Queen said in 1953 when we started, because remember that at that stage, racism was rampant. It was in virtually every country. And here she was, right at the beginning of the creation of the Commonwealth itself, saying that this should be a totally new construct. It was not going to be part of the old empire. This was about people coming together. And she said that the Commonwealth bears no resemblance to the empires of the past. It's an entirely new conception built on the highest qualities of the spirit of man, friendship, loyalty, and the desire for freedom and peace. But what was extraordinary was in 1953, she was saying to that new conception of an equal partnership of nations and races, she said, I shall give myself heart and soul every day of my life. So from the beginning, the Commonwealth has been saying race is important. Equality between the races is important. So after the George Floyd incident, we came together as a Commonwealth and basically said our job's not done. And there was the statement made again on race by our leaders who were underlining the fact that this was not going to be something we would ever give up on. So I think it was a powerful message. It came at a time when we were also desperately having to deal with COVID-19. But I'm proud of the fact that the Commonwealth hasn't ever put this baton down. We wish we could. We wish it would be over. But I think the fight is still there, and it will continue until we all decide that it has to stop in every form of life that we see it. But we're not there yet. But I honestly believe we could be, we should be. All we have to do, all of us, is to choose. And certainly the Commonwealth is choosing to stand against racism.
Thank you. Jaha, you're the CEO and founder of Safe Hands for Girls. Now, I wanted to ask you what you felt was the relationship between the fight against, the fight in favor of women's rights and the fight against racism.
I mean, I think the fight against women's rights, like I always say, women's rights are human rights. And a lot of the things that we are seeing are all violations of our fundamental right. If you look at an issue like female genital mutilation, for instance, if this was happening to white girls in America or in Europe, the world would be outraged, and by now it would have ended. But the fact that it's happening to black and brown girls, I don't think there's much, because like we've been talking about ending FGM, there has been the Millennium Development Goals, and now we have the Sustainable Development Goals. And everyone keeps saying that we want to end poverty, we want to end FGM, we want to do all of this by 2030. But it's a lot of lip service. And if we're really serious about the things that we are talking about, I think we should put our money where our mouth is. But you look at the Time's Up movement, for instance, or the Me Too movement, for instance, here in the United States, for the first time, women are not afraid to speak out. And then when it comes to racism, from the moment you're a child, if you're a black or brown person, you are constantly reminded that, you know, you're not enough. And whether it's through job application, that's why we undersell ourselves, because a lot of times we think that certain things and certain careers are not for people like us. That is changing, but it's still a huge problem. And then you constantly hear about women and their horror stories in Hollywood, in modeling, every industry in the world that you look at, there's constantly a problem there when it comes to women's rights. So I think there's a lot of coloration there, obviously, but you know, the way we look at these issues as a world might be different, but when you look closely, you realize that they are not. At the end of the day, it's inequality, and wherever inequality exists, and we keep quiet about it, personally, I believe we're part of the problem.